Hi. Today we're going to talk about how to show and not tell. So, if you're a writer that's always been like, what the F does that actually mean? It took me a minute to learn this when I first started writing fiction, and so I want to help break it down for you in this video. So, of course, you're a writer, so you're used to using words to create worlds, to create settings, all of these pieces. And so, of course, you're showing, not telling, right? Well, it's not always the case. Let me explain. So I'm Charlotte. I am an author. I am a developmental editor. I am also a life coach for authors, and I am really here to help you up-level your novel. So there are key areas that I look at as a developmental editor when working with clients. It could be around character development or pacing, and showing, not telling is also one of those big categories, which is why I wanted to create a video here. So learning to write in a way that really shows the reader what is happening versus telling them what is happening is really the difference between readers being very engaged, writing rave reviews, versus them feeling kind of like, oh, I don't know, like, did I enjoy that book? I'm not sure. So I don't want that wavering review for your book. I want you to have the most successful book ever. So let me explain a little bit further with an example. So say you're writing a mystery and your main character is Detective Smith, and he is obviously been assigned a case. There's a mystery to solve. So you might write a sentence such as, Detective Smith was determined to solve the case. Okay, great. He's a detective in a mystery. He's probably determined to solve the case. Otherwise, there might not be a story here. But when you think about this statement, the reader is probably already assuming he should be determined, and there's not really anything that conveys any emotion or really pulls the reader in other than, yes, there's a mystery that needs to be solved. Great, we've got that. So it's just kind of a flat statement. It doesn't engage the reader, and it doesn't make us feel anything. And so how might you be able to show the reader instead of just telling the reader that the detective is determined? How might you show the reader? So it might look something like this. Detective Smith's fingers tapped rhythmically on the worn surface of his desk, his eyes fixed on the crime scene photos scattered across it. He hadn't slept in days, and the stubble on his jaw hinted at the countless hours he'd spent chasing leads. The red string connecting photographs on his makeshift investigation board resembled a spider's web of connections, each strand a testament to his unyielding determination to unravel the mystery. Ooh, aren't you curious what the mystery is now? So I know the word determination was actually used in the last sentence of that paragraph, but did you feel like you were sinking into the story a little bit more? Like, not only did you have a further grasp on the scene, you also learned more about the detective himself. And so his determination was really shown through how he hadn't slept, how he was tapping his fingers on a worn desk, which also showed that he's had a lot of experience and has spent a lot of time at that desk. You know, the stubble on his cheek, that 5 o'clock shadow growing in, again, showing that he hadn't taken time away to take care of himself, to shave. So there's different ways that you can really get a clear description of not only the scene, we learn more about the character, but it also is helping to invite the reader in to feel something. So by showing his determination rather than just saying he's determined, really creates more of a world that allows the reader to sink into it. So as a developmental editor, my role is to really help you as a writer up-level your novel in key areas that makes the reader experience an unforgettable one. So let's work on showing and not telling together. So I'm going to share 2 more examples of showing, not telling, and then we're actually going to work together on an exercise to help you start to build your muscle of showing, not telling. Okay, so here's another example. So you might write, if you're writing a novel, setting, scenes, describing the area is a big part of what we do as writers. So the planet was desolate and barren. Okay, so that is very much so telling the reader that the planet was desolate and barren. So we can kind of start to imagine what that looks like. But if we were to show the reader what that looks like, it might sound something like this. The wind swept across the lifeless landscape, carrying with it a gritty haze of dust that stung the skin. The ground crackled and parched, stretched for miles without a single sign of vegetation. A solitary tumbleweed rolled across the vast expansion, its journey unhindered by any obstacle. The silence of the desolate echoed louder than any words could convey. Ooh, that sounds like my worst nightmare, being out in the middle of nowhere. But I'm sure I can feel that feeling, right? I can feel that feeling of being somewhere I don't necessarily want to be. There's a tumbleweed that is going forever and ever tumbling because there's nothing that's going to stop it. There's no obstacles in the way. There's no vegetation. So you get that feeling of it just being desolate. And also talking about the ground being cracked and parched, and that's all you can see. Again, we're getting that barren feeling. So that's another example of where, yes, you might be describing something as desolate and barren, but like, what are you actually seeing and looking at? And when we can describe things like the tumbleweeds and the lifeless landscape, that gives more of the visual to the reader, which then evokes those emotions that keeps them engaged. Helicopters flying over, you know. All right, so here is another example. And this is one that might come up a lot if you're writing romance, but she was deeply in love with him. Okay, cool. Many of us have been in love, so we probably know what that feeling feels like. But she was deeply in love with him is, again, telling us that she's in love with him. Where if we were to show that she's in love with him, it might sound something like this. Her heart raced at the sound of his name, and a blush crept across her cheeks whenever his eyes met hers. In the quiet moments, she caught herself tracing the lines of his face with her gaze, committing every detail to memory. The way his laughter filled the room became the melody she longed to hear, and the warmth of her hand in hers felt like the missing puzzle piece she never knew existed. Love for her was an unspoken language written in stolen glances and shared smiles. Ooh, that makes me feel warm and fuzzy. So again, we are saying, love is used. Love for her was an unspoken language. So that again is said at the end. So we are telling the reader again that they're in love, or she's in love with him. But you get to feel that more. So like your heart racing, the blushing of the cheeks, the wanting the warmth of his hand, longing the gaze, and hearing the laugh. Like all of those are such tactile things that really help build the picture and again, immerse us into the feelings of that character. And so hopefully these examples are making it clear on the difference between showing and telling. And so this is something that can be a lot easier said than done. And so I do want us to move into an exercise of doing this together right now. But before I do that, I will say that there are some benefits to telling over showing. And so not every single time when you're trying to describe that someone's in love or that the place is desolate, do you need to create a whole paragraph describing that. I sometimes in my first draft of my novel will write a lot of telling. And I do this because I'm trying to get the ideas out onto the page and I just want the story fleshed out. Sometimes my first drafts are just like extensive outlines. And so I will write a sentence like the landscape was barren and desolate. And what I do is make a note to myself that says, come back and describe this further. Because sometimes in that moment, I'm just trying to get the scene, the dialogue, whatever my goal of that writing session, I'm trying to get through that. And so knowing that if I start to describe all these pieces, it's sometimes going to throw off all the ideas that I need to get onto the page. And so there can be benefits to, especially in the first draft, just writing the telling and knowing that you're going to come back and potentially expand on that more. Also, I will say that telling is not always needed over showing. There are times, maybe if you're coming up to the end of a chapter or a scene and it's not the most important moment or the most important thing that a reader needs to know, it is okay to tell them some pieces of information. But overall, I would say 80% of the time you want to be showing, where 20% of the time maybe you are telling to keep the story moving forward. Okay, now let's build your showing, not telling muscle, and right here, right now, because so many times we can watch videos and then not actually implement what we learn, and I'm really big on implementing what we learn right away. So I'm going to give you a prompt here, and I want you to then pause the video and just write like a 3 to 4 sentence description that would turn this telling statement into a showing statement. So the statement is, Janice was scared. All right, now I want you to write 2 to 3 sentences that describe the showing of Janice being scared. So again, think about all of our senses. What does it feel like when we're scared? What does it look like? What is the character looking at that's potentially scaring them? Is it an internal fear or is it an external fear, right? So is there a bear chasing them, or are they super scared to take a leap off a cliff or to tell someone they love them? What is that fear? What is that moment that's coming up for them? What are they scared of? So again, take some time, write 2 to 3 sentences, and I will see you when you hit play again. Okay, how was that exercise for you? I'd love to know in the comments below. Was this helpful? What did you learn? What's a key takeaway from this video? And I'm gonna share with you a little bit of what I wrote from this prompt that Janice was scared. So Janice's hands trembled as she approached the dark closet. Her heart pounding in her chest, echoing with uncertainty, filled her mind. She hesitated at the doorknob, peering over her shoulder to see if anyone was watching, wondering what mysteries lied behind the cupboard. Okay, maybe not my best writing in a few minutes, but you get the idea. We've got that heart pounding. It's that feeling sensation that we're really engaging with readers. So again, this is one of the areas that I see most often with clients that are kind of struggling when they are writing their novel, and this is one of the things that will come up in that developmental edit. So again, I hope this was super helpful for you. I'd love to know, again, what your key takeaway from the video was below in the comments. Thank you for being here. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and happy writing.